According to the CDC, at least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year. That's in United States alone. We're not talking about other nations or continents, but in United States alone. And those are just the reported cases. So we got a whole lot of people who don't report. So abuse is underreported for so many reasons: fear, shame, confusion, and a lack of awareness. Baby, you go home and put yourself in timeout. If you're not having a good day, don't you go mess up somebody else's day. Welcome back to the Kitchen Table Podcast, a space for real conversation about tough topics. I am Jannetta, a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a parent, and I am passionate about advocating for children's safety and healing. So each week during this month, April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. So each week during this month, we're just going to pull up a chair at the table and we're going to talk about child abuse, what it looks like, how it impacts family, and most importantly, how we can protect and heal together. So some of these conversations may be heavy, but they are going to be necessary. And you are not alone. So just grab you a cup of something, get all settled and comfortable, and let's dig in. So let me tell you why I'm doing this and why this particular topic is important to me. So as a therapist, as a mom, I do have 3 adult children. I have seen both sides of child abuse. So I used to work for a local agency, and I worked in the program called Child Abuse and Trauma Services. And the reason why I wanted to work with children, because growing up, I did experience trauma, even in my adulthood too. But I didn't know it was trauma until I was like 30 years old. Is when I figured out what some things that I dealt with and went through in childhood was trauma. Didn't have a name, didn't have a language until I sat down with my first therapist, mental health therapist, at the age of 30. So once again, I worked with children who have carried unspeakable pain. I have sat with parents who didn't see the signs until it was too late. So I've seen and I've had silence give abuse room to grow. And I've seen how truth, when handled with care, becomes a turning point for healing. So this week, we are going to just talk about what is child abuse. And we'll go over some of the different types of child abuse, but we'll go into depth on next week. So you may be here because you've been impacted by abuse. Maybe you just a parent or a caregiver who wants to protect your kids. So maybe you work in schools, churches, or just in social service. Or maybe you just know that something needs to change. And wherever you hear and wherever you are watching from, just know that I'm glad that you're here so we can have this conversation. Now, my mission is just simple. We're going to break the silence, and we want to protect our children. And then we want to know what we can do to support each other, and just having a conversation, one conversation at a time, can change anything. So I am going to start off about identifying abuse. Abuse is defined as doing something harmful, while neglect is not doing anything in the care that could or does cause harm. Sometimes people get those two interchangeable, but they're not. Um, Abuse is physically harming someone. Neglect is refusing to give your child care. So whether it's that refusing to feed them, refusing to clothe them properly, shoes, having a place for them to stay, that's what neglect looked like. So children at high risk of abuse are those who live in single parenting households. You see why fathers are important? Single parenting households, your child is at a high risk. people who are experiencing poverty and domestic violence, foster care, have a limit or no having a limited or no community resources, having a disability, and having parents with mental illness. Now, does it say that you cannot be a parent if you have mental illness? No, it does not. But if you have mental illness and you're a parent and you are not getting that taken care of, then yes, you are neglecting or actually and abusing your child, because you can't be your best you because you're not taking care of your mental health. And so we all know that when we're not taking care of our mental health, we can do all kind of things, say all different type of hurtful things, and our thinking and thought pattern, it is not where it needs to be. So that's why it's important for everyone to make sure that you are taking care of your mental health, because when you don't, it turns into mental illness. And sometimes some mental illness are very seriously. Now, child abuse and neglect individual, childs with disability, unmarried mothers, maternal or parent depression, domestic violence at the home, community, lack of recreation facilities, and social, like poverty risk, living with an unrelated adult, and being a CPS reporting child of other risk, or other risk factors that we have. So child abuse isn't rare. It's been around for a long time. And it's not something that just happens somewhere else. It happens in your home. A lot of times when we talk about child abuse, we are actually seeing, if it's not happening in the home, it's someone that's close association to the family or family member. And it also happens in school. You know, I worked in the school system. Probably about a semester is all I could take, but I've seen a lot of verbal abuse and mental abuse from teachers, from educators. And they probably did not think or know that what they were doing was abusive. And the response that they got from the child um, did not, in no way, form, or fashion, um, help turn their behaviors into a positive way. So, according to the CDC, at least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year. That's in United States alone. We're not talking about other nations or continents, but in United States alone. And those are just the reported cases. So we got a whole lot of people who don't report. So abuse is underreported for so many reasons: fear, shame, confusion, and a lack of awareness. And sometimes, and this is just from working with children, they are afraid of tearing their family apart. Some of them are afraid of losing the parent, even though the parent may be the one abusing them. It's still, they still have this attachment to their caregivers. And one thing I can say about children, this is from working with them, and I also worked at a psychiatric hospital. And in the psychiatric hospital at that time, we only had children. And later on, after I left, they did have an adult union. But what I learned about them is that no matter what the parent does to the child, I don't care how bad it is, the child always have this sense of hope that they hold on to, that the parent will get better and the parent will love them the way that they need to be loved. And so a lot of times they won't say anything out of fear that they won't be able to be around that parent or their siblings and their family anymore, or they just shameful. And then we have some parents I already know that, hey, that, you're not supposed to be doing that. And so they can put fear into the child and cause the child not to report or say anything. So abuse doesn't happen one face. It happens in wealthy homes, poor homes, religious homes, and homes with good reputation, sorry. And sometimes the abuser is a stranger, but more often it's someone that the child knows and trusts. So we're going to talk about all of it, because the more we know, the better that we can protect. So physical abuse. And this is four types of abuse. I'm only going to go just very surface level with the definition, and the next week I'll get into more deep. Physical abuse. This includes hitting, burning, or any physical harm. Often kids who are told not to tell. They may say that they fell or they ran into something. So you kind of want to look for those patterns. Then we have emotional abuse. The thing with emotional abuse is not something that you can see. And I would have to say that emotional abuse probably is rated more, those cases is probably much more higher than physical. And that's just simply because no one can spot emotional abuse. And emotional abuse is calling, that name calling, belittling, rejecting, or constantly criticizing. It's invisible, but the scars run deep. One of the things about emotional abuse that I've learned and I've seen, and also experienced, is that anytime someone is emotionally abusing you, it tears down your health, your self-esteem. You do not have a healthy self-esteem, and anytime that you are very critical with your kids, always, oh, they can't do nothing right, they didn't try it, and every time they do something, you criticize them. And so what happens is that they don't feel confident enough to do anything. And so what happens with emotional abuse a lot of times, people who are emotionally abused real bad, they tend to be codependent. And so if you are being emotional abused with your kid or your children, you're actually teaching them how to be codependent because they don't know how to think for themselves, critically think for themselves. They are afraid to venture out and do things. They are afraid that if they say something, you're going to come back and criticize them. And so criticizing everything that they do, you're just tearing them down and not beating them up. And so they are not going to feel like they're good for anything in life at all. And most of all, their whole thing is going to be trying to please the caregiver, trying to please the parent. And so it's not even about what it is that I want to do, what is my purpose, me thinking about different things that I can do. Their whole focus is going to be trying to please the parent or the caregiver. Um, Sexual abuse. This includes any sexual activity with a child. It is horrifying and is more common than many realizes. Abusers often groom children and manipulate them into silence. Now, when we talk about sexual abuse, I think some people get that kind of mixed up with sexual assault. So, a lot of times, once again, with sexual abuse, it's going to always be someone who is in the family or a close association to the family because they have access to the child or the children. And we'll get real deep into that on the next couple of weeks when I go into details about sexual abuse. Sexual assault is when it happens one time, whether it's from a family member or from a stranger. That's sexual assault. But sexual abuse, meaning that it happens over a period of time. It happened more than once. So uh, just want to kind of clear that up. Neglect. When a child basic needs, food, shelter, supervision, and love are not met, neglect can be just as damaging as any form of abuse. Abuse isn't always loud. It is very subtle and it can be hidden in plain sight. And it doesn't stop affecting a child once they out of the situation. I'm going to repeat that again. It does not stop affecting the child once they out of that situation. So, foster parents, listen to me. Bring your ear a little bit closer. I want you to hear this. When you get your foster children, you have to know that there is some mental issues that need to be taken care of. You cannot parent the foster kids the way that you would parent a child who has never experienced any type of trauma, any type of strange situation that these kids that are in foster care has. You cannot. Probably about a month ago here in Oklahoma, we seen on the news where a foster parent had their foster child outside in the freezing cold, and we all know during that week, them temperatures was below zero. Um, Out there in the cold with no socks on, no shoes on, and said that they had her out there to help her reset. And had the neighbor or whoever was around wouldn't have recorded it, they wouldn't have never got caught. Now, this is not their first case that they had. Why they kept giving them kids, I don't understand. But it took the community to get on their necks for them to do anything. Now they have been arrested. They did post a bond, and we just gonna wait and see what the consequences is going to be, and if anything is going to happen. Um, but yes, I'm gonna say it once again, and even parents who adopt children too, you cannot, you cannot parent a child that has experienced trauma in the same way as a child who has never experienced trauma. So it is very important that you guys go and take some parenting class. And you just don't need to just go take a basic parenting class. You actually really need to go take a parenting class that's going to give you the tools, that's going to give you some, educate you on mental health, what it looks like, and what can you do to help the child, be their best you. So if you don't have a lot of patience, you don't really know what to do, and you still having behavior issues with the child, you probably want to rethink, and you probably want to go and take some more parenting classes. One parenting class that I will suggest that you guys take, and it's not even a parenting class, it's really therapy, and it's called PCIT therapy, parent child interactive therapy. That is real good. And what that does, it's going to help you connect. And if you don't already have a bond with your child, or if you do, it's just going to enhance it. But it really helps you connect and have a healthy bond with the child. And also is going to teach you on ways on how to discipline, and also just spending quality time with the children. So if you're listening, PCIT, I would encourage you to go and look at it. I think it's from age 2 to 7. There are some cases where you can be a little bit older, because I do PCIT therapy, and I have taken some kids who were age wise a little older, but mentally they was not the same age as they were, uh, you know, as they birth age. So why talk and help? So why a podcast? Why not just keep doing therapy and training? Because we need layers of prevention. We need parents to know, teachers to know, pastors to know, and coaches and babysitters and neighbors to know. So this podcast is about education, but also empowerment. You will walk away knowing what to look for and what to say and how to act. It's also healing. So if you are a survivor, you are not broken, you're not alone, you are not too far gone, and you are welcome here. If you're a parent and you feel like you missed something, this is not about anybody being shameful. This is about just starting now and right here where you at. I do want to share this though. I don't know if I shared this with one of my earlier podcasts or not, but I'm going to share it anyway again, so just in case. Um, I remember when I became an adult, and at first I didn't want no kids at all. Didn't want none. And somehow, like I had kids. But I always remember saying that I was not going to raise my children the way that I was raised. And that all sounded good, right? So going to get parenting classes in my culture was like a taboo. We all supposed to raise our kids the same way and alike, using those slave masters and Jim Crow um, tools that they gave us. And so I did not necessarily want it to raise my kids like that. And so I started off doing trial and error. I didn't have a guide. I didn't have anything to help me with that. So I just did what I thought, what I knew how to do. And it only worked for so long. And after it didn't work, I reverted back to how I was raised. I'll say this often. The seven the first 7 years of your life is very important, and it sets the brain default, and the brain always go back to what it knows. The default, it always default. And so that's what happened. And I had a situation with my oldest child that was not a good situation. They all grown now, so but it wasn't a good situation. And I remember after I disciplined him, I had went to the room and I was sitting on the floor, and my daughter, she was under the covers and she was shaking and she was crying. And I pulled the sheets back from her and I looked at her and I said, "What's wrong with you? Why you crying? You know, you didn't get disciplined." And she said, "Mama, you scaring me. I am scared of you." And when she said that, those words just pierced me, because I remember growing up in a household where I was afraid of my father, probably up until my teen years. But before then, I was extremely afraid of him. And that set me back and that took me back to that moment. And one of the things that I did not want my children to do is be afraid of me. I always wanted them and needed them to feel safe, knowing that they're going to be protected and I'm not going to hurt them. And I just remember in that moment that I just broke down. I just, whew, tears everywhere. I couldn't say anything. I have 3 kids. They were little, and they all came around me, and they just sat on my lap, and they just started hugging me and wiping my tears. And they was like, "Mama, you okay? We fine. We love you, Mama." And I just remember looking at them, and I said, "Y'all know what? I'll never ever discipline y'all like that again. And I am going to start disciplining y'all different, but you ain't never got to worry about me disciplining y'all like that again." And so the next day, I went and took one parenting class, first of many parenting classes that I have taken throughout the years. And I am so grateful that I had the grace to go and actually learn, because I didn't know. And it wasn't until I went and got that parenting class, like now I got a guide on what I can do, what this will do to help my kids versus me not having a guide. So I am so tired of us parents saying I did my best. Y'all, it's time for us to do better than our best. And so in order to do better than your best, you're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to take some parenting classes. That's just it. Cuz how else you going to know what to do? You know, my LLC name, my doing business as, is parenting does not come with a book. And parenting does not come with a book. But just because it does not come with a book does not mean that there is not a guide out there that can guide you. And so if anybody that is listening that's a new parent, that's getting ready to be a parent, I will encourage you guys to please go and enroll in a parenting class so you can have a guide, and so you won't make the same mistakes that your parents made. Every parent wants their child to do better in life than what they did. They want them to be a better parent, better mom, better father. And the only way that you're going to do that is you're going to have to go and get educated on what that looks like. So if you are in the Tulsa area, Family and Children Services, they have some good parenting classes for different ages and different stages. And I also give free parenting classes. I give one, it is evidence based, on Eric Erickson, 8 stages of life, developmental stages. And I also give one on kids' safety. and just teaching parents on how to know when their child is being abused, giving them tools that they need in order for them not to be abused. Once again, if you've been in a traumatized home growing up and you never ever went and got any help from a licensed therapist, if you never processed any of that in a healthy space, never got different lenses or anything to look through, um, I'm going to encourage you to do it, because a lot of times what happens is that you end up parenting the little girl or the little boy. You end up being to your children what you needed. And sometimes that's not necessarily what your kids need. When they grow up in a different environment, that's probably the big change, versus the environment that you grew up in. But I do want to encourage you guys to please go and go get some help. Now, here is what you can expect in the future episodes. We're going to have conversations. I will share more stories and stuff with you. We're going to dive deep into warning signs and safety tips. And we're going to just have real talk. We're going to have real talk about parenting and discipline. And we'll talk about a little about the CPS system, Child Protective Services. I don't know. I might invite a friend if she can join us about Child Protective Services. She's actually a supervisor over social workers who works in the Child Protective Service department. So, and then faith-based prospect on abuse, healing, and accountability. I will say this: any church people that are watching, any pastors or leaders, gone are the days where you guys can put anybody in place and not do a background check. Y'all gonna have to do a background check. And I'm not talking about just a local background check. You guys need to do a nationwide background check, because what I've seen happen a lot is that I see a lot of youth pastors that has not been vetted, that has not had any type of background check, and then y'all in the news because this pastor then sexually abused or sexually assault, the youth. And so what happens is that it doesn't make your church look good. And had you just did a background check, a nationwide background check, you would have found that this particular pastor or whoever's working with the kids, anybody that's assisting, you would have found out that they had a background and they were probably on the registered sex offender thing. So it's very important, not even just pastors who's working with kids, but just in general, y'all, anybody that's on staff, you need a nationwide background check. You got to protect your members, and you have to protect the church. And if you failing to do that, then you are failing. And I don't care how much that you feel that this person is called, and this is what they called to do, this, that, and the third, and that's good. And I'm not saying that they're not called to do that, this, that, and the third, but you do have the responsibility of doing those background checks, because if they're called to do this and that, then that means that you find something on their background. You have to make a decision. Are you going to let them work in this capacity or not? And if you choose to let them work, then y'all have to sit down with a plan. You got to have boundaries. You got to have people in set, how they're going to be monitored, how everything's going to be, So that is very important. You don't want to be caught on the news. And I know this happened with a real mega church in my area. 2015? They was all on the news. I think it was 2015, but I know it was like the middle 2000s. Yeah, they was all on the news, and you don't want that to happen. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to please make sure that you do background checks for everybody that's on your staff, not local, but you want to do nationwide. Um, I just want to thank you guys for being here for this first conversation about child abuse. And so, just by listening, you have taken a powerful step towards awareness, healing, and change. So, if this episode moved you, please take a moment to follow, like, and subscribe. Leave a review, leave some comments and some questions in there. Next week, we are going to dig deep into the 4 types of child abuse, what they look like, how to recognize them, and how to respond. Until then, be gentle with yourself and present with your children. And just a reminder, healing starts with a conversation. Remember, what you don't acknowledge and what you don't talk about, you can never heal from. And in the words of Tabitha Brown, go and have a good day. But if you're not having a good day, don't you mess up somebody else's day. And in my words, go put yourself in time out until you cool down. And then after you cool down, you can reconnect. Until then, I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.